friends. Welcome to Hurley Write TV. My name is Sam Otero, your host, and today we are going to be delving into the realm of professional grant writing. Our guest on today's show is a hydrologist who works exclusively within the realm of water conservation grant writing. He is a self-professed late bloomer that wore a blue collar most of his life until in his 40s he went back to school and obtained his degree from the University of Nevada, where he found out that he has to do a lot more writing than he ever had to do before in life. Nowadays, he finds himself interacting with people every day, nearly all day, and these folks are asking for information on how to apply for grants. They ask him what words to use. They talk about structure, presentation, or any other counsel that he may be willing to offer. He routinely finds himself reviewing applications even after award and making comments as to how they can say what needs to be said in a manner that will make the application float a little bit higher up the ladder. He often finds himself telling folks that they're really just trying to communicate what they are all about to people that have no idea who they are or why they need what they say that they need. So in today's show, we're going to delve right into getting rid of governmentese, and in this case, engineerese, making written products more accessible to a broader audience, and the use of active voice versus passive voice. And as our guest says, people in management need to know how to communicate better. But before we dive into our interview with Mr. Isaacson, let's have a little bit of fun. Words do matter, as we talk about all the time. And here to share with us another classic word fail, Pam Hurley. Pam loves to have some fun and remind people of what to do and what not to do. Welcome to the show.
Great. Yeah, great. Thanks, Sam. So today's word fail is about Target. And so in spring of 2013, Target had two dresses, right? And they were the same color. And so you might be thinking, well, how can color be a word fail? Well, it can, depending on what you call the color. And so again, these were two identical dresses, and one they called manatee gray, and the other one they called heather gray. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that the manatee gray referred to dresses that were plus size, and the heather gray referred to dresses that were regular size. And as we all know, manatees are called sea cows. So as you can imagine, women who were buying the plus size dresses weren't thrilled that the color that they were buying was called manatee gray. Now, what Target says is that the two departments that were naming the dresses or describing the dresses didn't confer with one another, which is a huge problem, obviously. But the other thing to think about is this notion of consistent terminology. And that's one of the things we talk about in our classes all the time. You want to make sure that whatever you call something in one place is what you call it throughout the entire document, right? When we talk about technical writing, writing for engineers, business writing, this is not the time to get out the thesaurus and try to find synonyms for the words that you're choosing. So Target would have learned a good lesson and avoided a lot of PR problems had they just adhered to this very simple principle. Use consistent terminology. Thanks so much for listening, and if you know of any word fails, email us, pam@hurleywrite.com, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much, Pam. We always have fun learning from you, and these examples are not exclusive to the industry that you're bringing to us, however, right? I mean, of course, that's a huge marketing fail, and as you said, a massive PR blunder, but this directly can apply to the world of grant reviewing as well.
Oh, absolutely, right. I mean, one of the things we're trying to do with the grant is we're trying to persuade the reader that the project that we're working on, that we're trying to get funding for, is legitimate and deserves to be funded, etc. And simple things like words or changing a word can change the entire meaning, right? And derail readers in terms of what it is, the action that you're trying to get them to take, for sure. So it applies across all industries and across all kinds of documents, for sure.
Good stuff. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, there you have it. A little bit of fun to start the show. And now we are going to go ahead and jump into our interview with our featured guest. Coming to us from Nevada, Mr. Isaacson. Thank you so much for joining the show and sharing your experience with us. I never spoke with a hydrologist before, so I'm excited to learn a little bit about your realm and how you can help our viewers.
Thanks. A hydrologist is like a geologist, but I work with water instead of dirt. And so, but beyond that, I'm basically work in water conservation. I've worked in water conservation for a number of years, and I work in just water. That's what I do.
And specifically, as we gave in reading your bio, you're focusing on helping people better their grants, and you had some things that you want to discuss with us. Let's get to the first point in our pre-interview phone call that we talked about. You seem to have a pet peeve about governmentese, or as you put it, engineerese in writing and presentations. You want to tell us a little bit about that and what people can do to alleviate that bottleneck.
It's in a real world situation. I deal with real world people all the time. I don't just work internally with folks. We're governmentese, where we use lots of different acronyms, and or engineerese, where we have to over explain things. So we're really, really, really clear about everything. It's not always as needful, and it's very clumsy and difficult for the average person to use that information. In the olden times, it was usually the engineer who applied for grants. It was usually the engineer who did all the paperwork, and that was fine. But as time is going on now, the average person might be working for a city or a state government or a county irrigation district, and they don't necessarily have the skill set to speak that language, that kind of syntax, and so they don't know how to communicate what their needs are to us in a way that makes sense, unless what we do is make it easy for them to do so, and we don't put these big restrictions on them as to how they say things. There's still some of that has to go on. They have to use certain key words and things like that help us. But bottom line is, my job is to make what we do accessible to people that don't speak those languages, don't speak those dialects. And so the information I provide has to be readable, and it has to be correct. And there's certain ways we have to do things. We can't do it just willy-nilly, but we have to do it in a way where we're not leaving people scratching their heads what we want.
So I know this is a very short interview, and of course your consultations and anything that you could do to help folks. I'm sure there's some back and forth and a lot of reviewing of documents, and there's not a silver bullet the whole way across. But certainly in your years, in terms of making documents or products, even presentations more accessible to a broader audience, some best practices that you can share very quickly. Give us some little thumbnail sketches that you've discovered over the years.
Well, one of the things I really key in on is you have to know your audience, know who you're talking to. You have to be able to maybe switch gears occasionally. For some, you might need to be more specific. You might need to use a lot of more techno speak, and that's fine. That's totally appropriate in certain venues. But you have to know your audience. You have to know who you're talking to in order to respond to them correctly. And I try to make it as easy as possible by, speaking in a way that, like we're having this conversation, you and I are having this conversation now, where you're really very clear about what you're saying. You're not beating around the bush, but when you're writing something, you usually only have one opportunity to write it. You don't get to have this conversation backwards and forwards. So you have to be clear the first time, and you have to do it in a way that is sensible. And use terms that are appropriate for the person that you're talking to, because otherwise you're at sea. You'll never get there. And what you want to get out of this. Like for my profession is I try to tell people you need to be speaking to people who know nothing about you, and you need to do it in such a way that they understand. So you have to use pictures, and I mean literal sometimes pictures, but also using words in ways that make sense to the other person. And don't couch it in a bunch of nonsensical narrative.
I mean, really, you're selling, aren't you? You're selling yourself, and you're selling your need. I know in your bio you had made mention that what you just elaborated on again here, and I think that a lot of people within their particular professional niche, maybe they say, I'm not a salesperson here, right? But you have to be. You got to put that hat on, don't you?
Well, you do, because if I'm speaking to you and I'm asking you to do something for me, I have to be very clear about what my needs are. Why should you invest in me? Why should you invest in me versus somebody else? Because what we do, not everybody gets funded, and that makes a huge difference. It makes an enormous difference. Sometimes we shine upon you and things go well, and even if you don't do a very good job of it. But other times it's like, oh, please, just get to your point. And their point's very simple, very clear, but they just don't know how to get there. And that's why it's really, really important. Like I said earlier, generally you only get one opportunity to write something to us. And you want to do it right the first time, because it's a cost you money to do this. It's not free to you.
This is a common thread that I'm seeing in the interviews and the professionals that I've come in contact with and interviewed through this new endeavor with Hurley Write, and that thread being the need for persuasive writing skills. So important, and I can imagine, especially within the realms of engineering, that there are a lot of folks that want to hang on data and the technical aspect of their writing, and because in their mind that's what is the most important thing, and they may be missing the boat in terms of, as you said, selling their point, why what they need is so important. And even what about, can you take that a little too far? Is there a way that you can end up focusing too much on the me aspect, or the we, and what it is that you need? Can you make it too personal?
Well, you can certainly do that. Data, when we talk about data, everything has to be supported by data. And so whatever you're saying has to be supported by data. I've told people we've talked at times, I said, never say because I said so. That doesn't work for me.
Some sound advice from our special guest, Mr. Ken Isakson. And, well, Ken has gone through a Hurley Write course or two in his lifetime and has applied the knowledge that he has learned from the experts at Hurley Write. And that's what we're hoping that you are going to have the opportunity to do as well. So we're going to bring one of our fabulous experts onto the show today to elaborate on some of the points that Mr. Isaacson was speaking on and play a little quiz game with us. Jennifer Torkelson, thank you so much for coming back to Hurley Write TV. What do you have in store for us this episode?
Well, I thought we could start out by talking about really the 5 key things that winning proposals achieve, or the 5 key characteristics of winning proposals. And then from there, we're going to talk about 3 scenarios and try to identify whether or not these proposal scenarios are relatable or debatable. So what are the characteristics of winning proposals? Well, first, winning proposals have a clear focus and purpose with goals that are SMART, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Second, winning proposals are supported by relevant data, whether that's quantitative, qualitative, whether it's narratives or numbers. It's all going to depend on the requirements of the agency that you're applying to. Third, winning proposals that are well organized and they fit those requirements that are specified in the agency's RFP. And fourth, and this is going to be really key for playing our game today, winning proposals are tailored to the interests and values of the funding agency so that the proposal is relatable and not debatable. And finally, winning proposals, they're polished, proofread, and packaged specifically for the reader. So ask yourself, do you want your grant proposals to be relatable or debatable? If you're providing a general narrative that could be copied and pasted across different contexts, then your proposal might be debatable. But if you're considering exactly who your readers will be, what the funding agency values, and how your goals align with the agency's goals, then your proposal will be relatable and, most importantly, successful. So think about who your readers are and always ask yourself and your team, is this relatable or debatable?
All right, so let's see if I was paying attention. And those of you out there watching, if you'd like to play along with us, you can interface with us. And, well, it's not real time yet. Hopefully we'll get to that point with the show. But for now, go ahead and drop us a comment in the YouTube video comments as to whether you believe my reaction to Jennifer's quiz questions is correct, or am I completely off base and wrong? Give us your rationale and your answer. Is it relatable or debatable, the scenario that she is presenting? And we're going to throw me under the bus here and see what I know about this topic. So, Jennifer, first subject, go.
So, scenario number 1. There's a large amount of funding for health-related initiatives, from healthcare grants to individuals, operational support for organizations or clinicians, and supporting researchers advancing the field. I am a nonprofit organization writing a grant proposal to secure funds from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration to hopefully address substance abuse treatment and support programs for youth specifically. While I cite a plethora of data from the CDC in my program need and description, I don't specifically target this proposal to the mission and goals of the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration because I want to apply for grants from similar agencies. So, Sam, is this relatable or debatable?
Well, I believe it would definitely be debatable because you're using generic. I'm going to give you my rationale.
Absolutely.
You're utilizing generic information in the hopes that you can kind of take a shotgun approach and utilize this over and over and over and over. However, those that are going to be reviewing the proposal have specific goals and specific outcomes that are, and specific data measuring points that they're looking for. They want to know that what you're going to provide is going to help them meet those goals. And I think that going about it that way would open up the door to debate.
Absolutely. And we'll have to hear from our viewers what they think, if it's relatable or debatable.
Number 2, go ahead.
All right, scenario number 2. So, scientists seeking funding to conduct research is one of the most sought after types of grant writing endeavors. Science-related projects are often difficult to fund through traditional methods because of their more complicated nature. I am a pharmaceutical researcher applying for an R21 grant for my work that has the potential to substantially advance biomedical research. In my proposal for the National Institutes of Health, I make sure to clearly and confidently explain the public health relevance of my work, highlighting both the significance and innovation of my hypothesis, my approach, and leaning on the strengths of each domain. Is this relatable or debatable?
It sounds to me pretty relatable.
Okay, why?
You're pulling from you're pulling from related sources, specific to, again, the funding sources, background and program objectives and goals.
Absolutely.
So you're pulling from sources they're going to be familiar with, and they're going to relate to and understand and say, yeah, this person's getting where we're coming from and where we're going.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll have to hear from our viewers as well to see what they think and see if you've actually hit the nail on the head there, Sam.
Probably not.
But I think you might be pretty close. No, I think you might be pretty close. All right, you ready for one more?
I am ready for one more. And
okay.
Go.
All right, so scenario number 3. I'm an agricultural firm applying for a grant from the USDA to conduct and complete my research on our new patented process to reduce the bitterness in orange juice and grapefruit juice. I provide significant background information on the compounds in oranges that produce a bitter taste, and I also talk about the consumer perspectives of bitter orange juice. but I don't fully address the significance and potential impacts of my patented debittering process on health and safety. Are my process and the materials we use deemed safe for food use? That may not be clear, but we have a detailed cost breakdown and a phased plan. Is this relatable or debatable?
I would say definitely debatable, because safety concerns are going to go directly to the potential bottom line, the profitability of any product, right? Massive lawsuits down the road are going to cut into profits and, of course, cause massive problems for the person that you're going to for the funding. So I would think that you really should be addressing health and safety concerns.
Yeah, and that's probably what the USDA is looking for, right? They want to make sure that you are ensuring food safety. Yes. Absolutely.
All right. So we don't want you to tell me how I did, but I hope I did well. You can tell me how bad I tanked it offline here. So, folks, you are watching. What I would like to, I'm going to put the challenge out to you. Put into the comments what you think, whether these scenarios were relatable or debatable, your thoughts and your rationale for those thoughts. And you can reach out to Jennifer or any of the wonderful educators at Hurley Write by sending us an email at info@hurleywrite.com. Okay, closing words for this segment, Jennifer?
Well, again, I think you just always need to ask yourself, and when you are working on your own proposals, you're considering your readers with them, right? That all important, what's in it for me? And you really want your proposals to be relatable and not debatable. You could consider a grant proposal's purpose, context, and expectations in order to make it applicable across many contexts, but beware, because that approach has severe limitations, especially if your goal is to learn how to maximize your audience in order to win funding from a granting agency. So ask yourself, is this relatable to your funding agency, to your goals, or is this debatable? Because you don't want to end up on that reject pile.
That was great. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, let's get back to Mr. Isaacson, see what he has to say about his experience in this world.
Show me chapter and verse, quote it, where what you're saying to me is meaningful. I have to know this. I have to be as objective as possible. And so that's one of the reasons when we look at stuff, we wanted to evaluate it. We have professionals. I'm one of them who will review these things and say, no, this isn't going to fly, or this is a good fit. And there's a certain level of subjectivity. So if you can't tell your story well, you aren't going to be successful in my program. You just won't. And if you just throw data at us without explaining what we're supposed to be looking at, you're sunk, because we're not going to plow through it for you. You need to guide our eyes through what you want us to see. And don't couch it in lots of words, and don't just throw stuff in front of us, because we don't have time for it.
Excellent advice. One of the things that you had brought up to me when we were discussing this on the phone, again, the tendency of people to write and present in a passive voice versus the active voice, and you advocate the shifting to active voice. You want to elaborate on that a little bit? Maybe give us some examples of what you're talking about? And how it might affect the review process. I think that's important. I mean, we can illustrate examples, but what might the effect on the reviewer be?
Well, we don't want the reviewer to sit there and roll their eyes back in the back of their heads as they're trying to plow through a lot of techno-speak, saying things in a long-winded fashion, in a third person. All of this, it's not necessary. And it's really, this is something I learned a long time ago. You don't want to make the readers work harder than they have to. And by being in first person, being in active speech mode, it's like you're having a conversation with somebody, and you're trying to walk them through your ideas. And by doing that, and approaching it that way, it makes it much easier for them to stay focused on what your point is. When you switch back and forth, or you go into these long-winded diatribes, which it's just not worth it. It's not worth their effort, and it's not worth theirs, because it's just not going to get there. And we have lots of different professions that are involved, some from very legal backgrounds to some that are just just engineers. That's what they do. And so they're all looking at the same thing. They're all reading it, and they're all very, very smart, and they're all very highly skilled, and some have doctorates and things like that. And they're not impressed. They just need, tell me your story. Tell me exactly what you want and why we should waste our time or spend our time with you. And so it's really what's important. It's just to be a very clear communicator, be it verbally or be it in a written fashion. But if you say it verbally, you have to back it up. You have to, and so the way you write and the way you speak are basically going to be the same thing. Is that how you talk to somebody? I had that conversation once a long time ago with someone, and they wrote this long-winded treatise for something that was very simple. And I said, is that how you talk? No. Well, maybe you should write it the way you talk. It'll still get the point across. And that's what I usually do.
You had told me that you feel that people in management need to know how to communicate better in general.
Management is a skill. It's just like a skill like any other skill. I am a program manager. I'm not a manager of people. And the tendency is to get locked into what you're trying to do versus the people you're working with, motivating people and all that sort of stuff. And managers can be really obtuse. If they may be really technically skilled at what they do, they may be just consummate professionals at their profession. But that doesn't translate well when you're trying to lead others and trying to communicate information. And I see things all the time that comes from folks that, why did you take a page to say something that could have been said in less than a paragraph? It just doesn't need to be that way. Because again, why make your people read and labor through your treatise? Why not just make it very simple? Cut to the chase, tell them what they need to know, back it up with as much as you need to, and press on. And if somebody wants to know more, have them come on back. But you just don't need to, as a general policy, you just don't need to write 4 or 5 page tomes when all you need to do is just tell people what they need to know and get it done and over with.
Well, Ken, you really touched on some great points here, sound advice. And how long have you been in this position to be able to offer such counsel to people?
Well, I've worked where I work for the last 18 years, but I've been doing what I'm doing now only for the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. It's just, I've learned. Hurley Write, I learned a lot from Pam. We had conversations. I learned a lot from her. And a number of years ago, and it stuck. And I've tried my very best to employ it. But now that I'm in a position to employ it, that's just what I do. And because my job is to help people, literally to help people, and to help them get better at what they're doing, water management. And this is what they're trying to achieve. This is what I'm trying to help them do. And I've always told them, when you're successful, I'm successful. And that literally is my mantra. And so to that end, that's where we go. And I will help anybody and everybody. I don't care if you're $1 billion business or you're just a little tiny town out in the middle of nowhere. I will help you get better, and if I can.
That's awesome. Wow. You know what? That was a perfect out for the show. Because really that's what we're all about here. That's the mission of Hurley Write Incorporated, and taking it to this television format. One of the things I'm so excited about is to meet folks like you that have that same passion for helping people better their communication skills, which are not only going to affect their career, but these are, I say this all the time, these are life skills. that we can apply to, to our personal relationships as well. It's nice to see that you have that passion and that sense of empathy towards others, and that's what's driving you. So thank you so much for sharing those thoughts with us and for coming on the show and sharing your technical and professional experience with our audience as well. Ken Isakson, thanks so much for joining us on Hurley Write TV.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely, sir. Well, there you have it. And another absolutely wonderful testimonial and story from somebody out there in the real world doing it and caring about you. That's what we are all about here at Hurley Write TV. If you are interested in coming on the show and telling us your story, sharing your expertise with our audience, we certainly would love to hear from you. Feel free to contact me at Hurley Write. Maybe we can even put you together with one of our professionals and do a live online learning experience right here in the virtual television studio. So for everybody at hurleywrite.tv, I'm Sam Matero. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time around right here at hurleywrite.tv.